Today's video is about Mountain Blade Bannerlord. Console players are just now getting their hands on it, and I figured it'd be a good time to give a video with some tips and tricks for new players. First tip I have for you is get the combat down. If you played Mountain Blade Warband, or if you haven't, the most important thing to do in this game is to get the combat down. It's directional based. The best way to do this is to actually go to the closest town and go to the practice fights. Practice fights are basically little battle royale arena fights, and it'll give you a great chance to get some combat in a battlefield scenario. And you can earn money doing it. Not very much unless you win, but it'll teach you environmental awareness, and it'll teach you how to get the combat down, parrying, blocking, watching out for ranged attacks. It's a good way to really get your grasp on it. And tip number 2 is at every city you visit, try to check at the arena to see if there's a tournament. Tournaments offer prizes and opportunities to bet to win money on yourself, while also offering a safe environment to level up your combat prowess. Tournaments are also one of the best ways to increase the renown of your clan and grow your clan level, especially in the early game when most of the actual battles you're going to be taking place in are probably going to be against bandits or looters. There's even a leaderboard where you can see other lords, and it's not too hard. After participating in several tournaments, you'll probably be on top of the leaderboard. There's no actual prize or reward for this, it's just something that the game keeps track of. In some ways, it actually hurts you over time, because the more renowned you become for winning tournaments, the less money that you're going to win on betting for yourself. Tip number 3. This tip is about the campaign mode specifically. If you're playing campaign mode, one of the first story missions it has you do is raise your clan rank to level 2, and then it'll trigger a mission where you'll get a message from Radagos, the bandit who kidnapped your brother and sister, and basically he'll come find you and tell you that your brother's in trouble and that his clan betrayed him and blah blah blah. It's part of the story. Do this mission as soon as possible, because what it does is it brings your younger brother and sister back into your clan, and it brings your older brother into the clan. Your older brother is a very valuable asset because he starts off with a lot higher level than you, and as of right now, the game typically lets you assign his traits as soon as he's brought to the party, so you got a lot of variety having a high level clan member early on. This kind of goes hand in hand with this one, but you really want to expand your clan's influence, whether you're recruiting companions, or you're getting married and having children, or you're marrying off your brother to have children. Whatever you're doing, you want to expand your clan's influence, because each member of your clan like that is going to grow your power. If you have 10 members in your clan, you have a lot more power and flexibility than a clan that only has 3 members, which is pretty common for the lower tier clans. Marriage is probably going to be out of your reach for a while in the early game, because you're going to need to get more renown and basically, befriend a lord before you're going to be able to marry off, unless you somehow make a crap load of money in the early game, which the next tip will probably help with that. Tip number 4, trading. So here's basically a rundown of how trading works. When you go into a town, the town has villages that feed into the town's resources. Those vassal villages will contribute to the town's resources. So if you have a village that contributes horses, then the town nearby is probably going to have horses. The only exception to this is normally when there are countries, especially countries at war, next to each other. That's going to significantly reduce the amount of available resources in that town. So what is a great way to do some trading is to trade between kingdoms who are at war. This works out pretty well, especially a resource that one kingdom has that the other kingdom doesn't have access to, like more rare things like inland towns aren't really going to have much access to fish. Desert towns don't have access to lumber, stuff like that. And as you go to each town, try to make a mental note of what everything's running, how much something is worth at that town. And the game kind of keeps track of that for you, and that'll help you get an idea for what it's worth. That way, if you go to a town and you're like, oh, mules in this town, which is a pretty popular one for trading, mules in this town are worth 100 gold. And then you go to the next town and you find mules selling for 50 gold. Okay, then you know that you could probably buy a bunch of those mules and probably flip them for a pretty reasonable price. And that's just something to keep in your mind, because you're always going to be going to the trader in towns, whether it's to sell your own loot or to try to upgrade your equipment yourself. So when you're doing this, go ahead and look at the trade resources. Even if you're not going to focus on a trader specific focus, it is a good thing to bear in mind when you're playing the game. To set up workshops in a town, this is another thing to factor in, because normally workshops require a raw resource and produce a finished resource. So, like a brewery takes in wheat, produces beer. Therefore, you do not want to ever build a brewery in a town that does not have very good access to wheat, or grain in this case. Otherwise, your profits are going to go through the ground. So, also, workshops are not a great investment. They take way too long, and if you're ever in a situation where you're at war with the town that your workshop is in, then you don't get any money from it. So that can be a definite problem, and they cost a lot to buy. Same thing with caravans. The cost outweighs the potential profit almost completely. If you're really wanting to make money, everyone that has been playing the game for the past couple of years has already figured out that the most surefire way to make money, and I don't know if they'll wind up nerfing this, is smithing. You level up smithing by mostly dismantling weapons that you find off of like bandit parties and stuff. You can take cheap weapons, break them down into the raw resources, and that's pretty much how you're going to want to level it up for a while. The biggest thing you're going to need for this is hardwood. So anytime you go to a town, normally towards like the Western Empire, like Britannia, that kind of area, the forest area, anytime you're over there, try to find some lumber cheap, buy up a bunch of it, use it to smith charcoal, and then you'll be able to dismantle a bunch of weapons. If you get stuff like lower tier weapons like pickaxes and stuff, are mostly wood, so you can keep making charcoal from them. Remember, you're not going to make any money off of this really at first, because it's mostly just grinding away to get your levels up. But after you do, you will be able to craft some really valuable weapons. It's kind of like the opposite of a game like Skyrim, where in like Skyrim you could eventually like make a weapon or armor that's just so ridiculously powerful that's better than anything else that the game will ever provide you. This is kind of the opposite. You can make good weapons, but they're not really about the stats as much as it's about the value. Weapons are always going to be worth a lot of money once you've gotten pretty high level. Of course, a lot of players just completely ignore blacksmithing because they almost consider it cheating. I just never wanted to grind away at like getting the skill high enough up to actually make the money. And I personally prefer making my money on quest. I'm not sure what the current active quests are just yet because I haven't played very much in this update, but my favorite personal quest, if you ever find it, is Landlord Needs Manual Laborers. This is where you'll go to a village, and the village headman wants you to bring him manual laborers. This quest could definitely become controversial, and it might have been taken out because of that, but basically what he wants you to do is take in prisoners that are, not actual soldiers, so like bandits, and he wants you to sell them to him, and he will provide them. He will pay you for them something like 5 times worth what their value is to like a ransom broker. So if you manage to get a hold of like some bandit bosses, like you clear out some hideouts and get some bandit bosses, you could sell them for a really high amount of money. And he normally requires you to give him so many bandits, but you can normally give them much more. There is a cap on how many they'll take, and once you hit that, it'll just automatically finish the quest. But I'm talking like, at least when this quest first came out, I was making a ridiculous amount of money off of this quest. And the only problem that you'll come across is where I like the game actually is a decent RPG with some quests like this, because sometimes, not every time, you'll have a member of the village come up to you after you've had that discussion with the headman, and they'll be like, the landlord is basically taking our jobs and using these laborers to replace us, and it'll leave us without money. And it'll basically give you the option to tell them, I don't care, I need the money, and I'm going to take the money. Tell them, okay, you're right, I don't want to do that to you, and cancel the quest right then and there. Or the third option, which I pretty much always take, because it both helps you get the money and it helps increase your relationship with the villagers, is offer to split the money with them. Which again, this quest is going to make you quite a bit of money already, and by splitting it with them, it also increases your relationship with the village, which will let you recruit more soldiers from them later on, which is always something that you want to keep in mind. And that's it for today. Please like and subscribe.